Namaskar and thank you for joining us here on our weekly program on geoeconomics. Today we put into context the contribution of Professor Claudia Goldin, who has been awarded this year's Nobel Prize for Economics. She is an economic historian who teaches at the Harvard University. Her research identifies 4 phases of women's participation in the US economy over 200 years, and the first 3 of independent workers up to 1920. Then the constraints on married women, that's between 1930s and 1950s, and the roots of a revolution between 1950s and 1970s. These are all evolutionary, is what she says. And then since the 1970s, according to her data, a quiet revolution has been taking place. Let's listen to what she said.
So you might ask, what is it that I have studied? And there are really 2 sides to this subject, or at least 2. The first concerns women who throughout history have often been hidden from view and often uncompensated in ways that men have been by an economic marketplace. They have over time left that arena of home or family farm or family business and move to the greater arena of market production. They've become workers. They have begun earning a living for themselves and for their families. Their lives have greatly changed, but the labor market and the policies of governments are often slower to respond.
Well, to discuss this, we have with us Ms. Dakshita Das, a former civil servant who heads a government committee now on gender budgeting, and Dr. Nupur Tiwary is professor at the Indian Institute of Public Administration. She specializes on issues of social justice. Thank you very much, ladies, for being with us. Ms. Das, we'll start with you. Can the gender gap, data that Professor Goldin has compiled, she's taken it from the United States, can it be used as a blueprint, for labor markets across the world?
Undoubtedly. What she has done is that she has used empirical evidence to establish that almost 100 years ago, mostly women, were not working in the United States. Things started changing. There were historical incidents which changed, which created a demand for women labor to enter. There were other instances, service industry grew. But what is interesting is that there are direct implications for India as to what her conclusions are. Because we can perhaps say that what US was in 1920s in terms of women employment is what India is now, with about 25% of Indian women being available as a part of the labor force. Therefore, there is tremendous lessons. There are a lot of lessons to be learned, because all said and done, there is no going away from the fact that co-opting women in the labor force is very good for a country's GDP, apart, of course, from the human angle in what it does to women who comprise 50% of the population.
Indeed. Dr. Tiwary, Professor Goldin, she finds that the rise of the service sector, it has brought women back into the workforce. And she highlights that, many of them are taking law, economics, and medicine. How gender sensitive or let's say professional is the workspace now?
Since this is more a historical perspective that she has tried to, the whole findings are woven around this fact, I would just like to say that there are at present 166 million women either working, seeking work, or they are available for the work. And it is also that 90% of the women in India, more or less, work in the informal workforce. So 9.8% of the time of these women, especially, goes in the household or household course work, which is not accountable also as per Professor, she has given this kind of a statement in that. So even the world total is only 2.6%. Global average of women as per the UN Women statement that is made. So if this, especially when the women are now coming out of informal workforce, when you have a more service sector which is more structured, the discrimination and also kind of a, if we talk about gender equality and gender parity, it will be a challenge how they are going to meet it. But as of now, yes, as per Professor Claudia's this the whole paradigm that shows it's a U-turn, from the agrarian to the industry. Then later on it goes down, and again it is after education and contraceptives, it has taken a more upward field. So it is quite premature to comment on that.
Okay, Ms. Das, Professor Goldin, she highlights that, if she looks at the early 20th century, she says that 20% of the women were in the labor market, but only 5% of the married women were in the labor market at that time. So there were laws against married women working, also societal pressures. How different is the system now, 100 years later?
I think there is a huge revolution which has happened worldwide. Let's talk of the factors which have led to the what I call as a revolution for the women. An enabling atmosphere has been created. Equal voting rights are there. Equal educational opportunities are there. The bias between married and unmarried women doesn't exist anymore. And if you look at India, there is a lot happening, which we can discuss perhaps later, in creating an ecosystem. The problem which is there is that, which I feel is a very unstated uh, a part of this entire dialogue, is that there has been an industrial revolution which reached the Western world much before it reached India. Therefore, to that extent, whichever way we have grown slowly, but we have grown well. We have got legislative practices in place which empower women. We have given equal rights to them in the constitution, which was,
Yes.
I think, an absolutely revolutionary decision. And on today's date, some rapid fire tech, fintech based, and the entire internet access which is available is changing things. What we need to do is, however, we need to bring women into the workplace, which is a different problem than why there is a problem. The
Okay.
problem, I think, in terms of an ecosystem is vanishing. Maybe it will take some time, but how to bring them in still remains a problem.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Tiwary, one of the big concerns is, taking off from the point that Ms. Das makes, is that even today, married women are still not treated at par, with married men in the workforce. So when we look at, after all, the men are also married. So in the case, there should be shared home responsibilities, perhaps, which could take, provide a more level playing field for women, because they otherwise have to go home and do the double shift.
Absolutely, the work of a mother, even in this report, it has been shown that the work of a mother, especially a married woman, is the biggest constraint in coming to the full force for a woman. Because, this is a different, saying, or even it has come out in the report that both are the losers, because she has stated that a man steps up in taking up a job, but he loses at the family front, that he is not spending the same time in the family, and a woman has to step down in taking up a career, but she spends times with the family. But in this case, the biggest loser is a woman, because she is doing all the work at the grass at home, and maximum time gone in her work, that is a caretaker of the home, and doing a lot of things which remains unpaid for. And there's also mentioned that when the census, it was calculated on the contribution of the women, and it showed that the 50% of the women, in that terms, the portion that was shown that a woman is a wife, where this factor was not taken into account, that she is contributing towards the growth of the economy. Like, when she is working as a, even as a married woman at home, she is working with her husband in the agriculture, or she is looking after small poultry farm, or whatever the work that is there, but that part was never taken account. That's why women's contribution in the economy, the growth of economy, was never taken care of. So she has highlighted that this was a very negligence or a negative projection of women's contribution that was stated in the basic growth or the basic economy. So now, after all these findings, definitely the saying that it's a housewife or a woman or a mother will be given a second thought.
Okay, so a proper ecosystem really needs to be created. Ms. Das, she's observed that unmarried and childless women are treated better. So it is difficult then for working women, obviously, to get married and or to have children, because otherwise their careers are at a problem. So is it difficult then for a woman to choose not to marry, or for married women choose not to have children? At a subconscious level, does it affect the way they work?
Look, I think in this entire debate or dialogue, we can't say that one shouldn't get married because of one's employability. As I said, we need to find ways in which we bring women back into the workplace. And how do we do that? First of all, we need adequate role models. We are looking in India at a first generation woman leadership. Definitely, the generation which is there, say my children, will look upon me as a classic example of a working woman who's also managing the house. Second is the participating role of men, which has to go against the current cultural norms. Now, these are the enabling things, and then we all need heroes and we need heroines. We need people. I mean, like you look at the recently concluded Asian Games, so many women have run, and so many of them have been children of women who've run. There is that classic case of a girl whose mother was pregnant when she took her trials, and look at her. The girl won a silver medal. So that's a role model. So those are the ecosystem changes which are required. I don't think not marrying is an option. You want to get married, you should get married. It's a choice which you need to make. Not having children, make a choice. And these are choices which only come when you have education, when you have an enabling cultural environment. I don't think that for working you need to sacrifice either children or your jobs.
Well, that's an important point to make, because social pressures are such, or at least the work environment is such, that they have made these sacrifices to progress in their careers. But Dr. Tiwary, Professor Goldin has also noticed that despite qualifications and education being the same, that's in the current environment, men are often chosen first and they're even paid more. And this is the result of stereotypes. Should this be changed by legislation, perhaps? Or, and also, how do you think that it should best way to bridge the gender pay gap?
Okay. So definitely the point which you are making has some valid points. But I'll also state one study which I did on MG Narega, where you have a right to work. When women, highest participation of women was found in Kerala, in this work. And we just looking at the data set and our own survey that we did, that, okay, this particular, is paying very well for the women. But later on a deeper intervention, we found that majorly since in MG Narega, the payment is very little, and in states like Kerala or in some of other parts of the country where labor force or the labor per day rate is very high, so the women are being forced to take up this, MG Narega work that is an unskilled labor. Even the lactating mother or a mother who's some old lady are being asked to take up, and a more higher job, higher paid job, or a better skilled job are being taken by the men. So in this case, it paid as a negative, impact on women, that they are forced to take something which is not otherwise taken by a man. The same way in, for instance, in Panchayati Raj system, this is different from labor market. But if you talk about the role of a male and a female, then majorly when if you have more than 1 million elected women representatives, biggest constraint that you find in the system is the panchayat patis. They are not leaving even the elected women representative the space that is due to them to take the decision, to take their own plannings, and even to the extent to take their own implementation. So in both the ways, whether that's a informal workforce or a formal workforce or the legislation that is a reservation, there are much deeper and underlying, layers which are to be still invaded.
Ms. Das, Professor Claudia Goldin has also noticed that in high-income countries, women are often highly educated. They are more educated than the men. In fact, is what she's said in these countries. So, do you see this also as being a primary reason for the change that is being affected, at least over there?
Yeah, well, definitely. As I said earlier, it's the Industrial Revolution, it is a high level of education, it is the fact that in these high income countries, there has been a full process of growth, of shedding of cultural norms, which went against the working of women. Now, the issue which is coming in while Dr. Nupur has mentioned about what I would deem to be the lower earning areas in India, the fact is that pay disparities exist even as far as higher income groups are concerned. And this is where you have educated women coming out to work. Now, there are multiple reasons behind it, but an IIM study establishes that the disparity can be a woman earning 85 rupees to a man earning 100. Now, why does this happen? This happens because a woman, a married woman uh, with children, a married woman with responsibilities of in laws, of running a house, maybe an unmarried woman with parental responsibilities, whichever way, these are all fall on the shoulders of a woman. Therefore, uh, there are breaks to be taken, and therefore, when women re enter, they lose out on certain periods where their male counterparts have dominated. And here there is another important point to be noted, that who has created these type of workspaces, who has created this work culture which is extremely demanding, long hours, and a lot of it can be deemed to be a certain level of time wastage. It's largely men, because they were the ones who were leading in the front as far as employability was concerned. And also the fact that a lot of organizations don't offer creches, you don't have childcare support options available so easily, let alone geriatric care. That's another problem which is just unaddressed in India. So yes, the higher educated countries do have these options. Then we have geriatric care options, albeit not very, what I can say, very efficient maybe, debatable whether they are highly efficient. But in India, these are all concerns. So, yes, I do
Yes.
believe that, like Australia has done, that you have name and shame wherever there is a pay disparity, particularly in the higher earning groups. This
Okay.
should be a matter of documentation. And there should be a name and shame kind of a scenario which should emerge, so that other girls, other women who are waiting around the corner to enter jobs of leadership, they feel inspired.
Right. Indeed. Uh, Dr. Tiwari, Professor Golden has also noticed that she's talked about the evolutionary phase as well. That's the first, three phases she talked about. The factory system, it took women out of the workplace. And here too, initially, you were talking about Manrega and all that. The initial pay gaps were small because they were daily wage rosters. But when the contracts became monthly and yearly, that's when the gaps really widened. Do you see this as a problem, in the evolutionary phase, that, it set the patterns in a sense that, if they were working on a daily basis, the pay gaps were not so high, but when they worked, for the entire year or for the month, that's when the men started getting paid more.
Yes, to some extent, this is correct. When they were working as in the agriculture, that agrarian phase, women involvement was more, and even the curve, the basic curve that was going ahead was better. But then it took a downturn when the industrial revolution came, where the participation of the women became very low, and at the time they were not able to work from home because the responsibility at home or taking care of family, children, and other things really got more on their, it was there already there on the shoulder, but at the time it was difficult for them to leave the home and go to the industry and to work there. So in this, in your case, like whatever you were saying is partially to some extent is correct, that if you go for a longer payment, daily wages could be a little, but for a longer pace, yes, it could have a deeper impact on the further to taking this curve further upwards.
Okay, but obviously over there too, changes need to be put in place. Uh, Ms. Das, you know, several women are in powerful positions. We know that already, isn't it? And given Goldin's path-breaking work, do you see systems now being legitimized, for gender equality? Because she's given so many models of 200 years of data that it's time now to, just say that this is the way ahead and this is the way to do it.
I mean, her getting this award is in itself very inspirational. And though she's not an Indian, far away from being an Indian, but the fact is that you and I are talking about it, and that means that she becomes a source of inspiration. But yes, women in leadership roles do carry a lot more responsibility. Their responsibility is in terms of becoming role models and inspirational role models. And I think also a lot of that comes from home. If a mother encourages her daughter to step out, to follow her education, if a mother is an investor, and by the way, that is a silent revolution which India has seen, where with the Jam Trinity and the Jandhan accounts, we are finding that a lot of investments are shifting in the households from the man to the woman. Now, so therefore, across the spectrum, whoever is in a position of responsibility does have does carry the burden of being an inspirational role model. And here there is a very important point that Claudia Goldin is only the third woman since 1969, that is, since the Nobel Prizes were constituted,
Right.
to get this. So that's a very big statistic, that it has taken that long for a woman to rise up and to get an award. And she
True.
becomes therefore even more inspirational.
True, absolutely. And all the three who have won the Nobel Prize have actually won them from 2009 onwards,
Yeah,
2009, 19,
true.
and now 23.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. Tiwary, the Nobel Committee says that Goldin's discoveries, they have vast societal implications. That's why she was given the award. So to what extent can it be applied? There are societies where freedoms are curtailed. We know that that's another big issue that the world is facing. So how will, it be applied in those kind of societies? Or is it an assumption that, societies have to be democratic and free for them to achieve these kind of models?
In women case, there's nothing like assumption. Definitely, it's tremendous work. I would say 200-year-old data set that she worked on, and it was in a simple line. It was to understand women and gender better, even to the extent that social stigma, legislation, and other institutional barriers have been well stated in that findings. And it's not only the Western country, even Indian aspect has been many extent, because gender is not a category, but yes, there are you cannot say it's a category, like, there are many layers of it. So all these things are dealt very well in that report of hers and that study of hers, even though she has taken the US America, part of it, but the same aspect to some extent is also there in a developing country or underdeveloped country, to education, legislation, and also affirmative action, role models. These things do have a great impact. And when
Right.
we look into the political leaders, especially at the grassroots level, where you have more women and you have more stigma,
Sure.
related social stigma, there the role of this woman as a leader plays even a better role. So what
Sure.
she has talked about now, definitely it will lead up, pave the way for actually looking into gender aspect from these various perspectives, and to find a better way of actually getting into deeper into all these aspects.
A final word from you, Ms. Das. We are now, there is legislation in place for more leadership roles for women in our country. I mean, what is the future like? Would we see, you know, one of the Millennium Development Goals is gender parity. I mean, sorry, one of the SDGs is gender parity by 2030. Is that going to happen?
I'm sure, because I think the young girls are running far ahead. They've got the ecosystem, they've got the changes. As I said, the tech revolution has been a dramatic game changer. Look, if you aspire, that is enough. And we find that young Indians are full of aspiration. So I think, yes, the future is good.
Okay, we leave it there. Thank you very much, Ms. Dakshita Das and Dr. Nupur Tiwary. Thank you very much for enlightening us on this subject. In conclusion, let's just say this, that only 2 women have previously won the Economics Prize, Elinor Ostrom in 2009 and Esther Duflo in 2019, and they had shared their prizes with other winners. And so it's interesting to note that, you know, Goldin, she said the first thing that she did on hearing that she had won the award was to tell her husband. And he asked her what he could do. And she told him, go take the dog out and make some tea. And because what did she have to do? She had to prepare for a press conference. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.